So for folks that don't know, New York City just instituted one of the like craziest vaccine mandates, most extreme that we've seen, definitely here in the US, the most extreme, and honestly much more extreme than most other countries. So Mayor Bill de Blasio, who is actually thankfully on his way out of office, he decided, I'm on my way out, might as well do whatever the heck I want and go crazy before I leave. So he just issued an expansion to the vaccine mandate for employment that it literally applies to almost all private employers, even like tiny small businesses and individual entrepreneurs. So if you want to work in New York City, basically you must be vaccinated under this new order. And it's really weird to me because it's coming at a time where New York over the last 6 months has been averaging about 10 COVID deaths a week, give or take, right? A very small amount in a city of more than 8 million people. So Bill de Blasio is essentially like, they've already got 90% of New Yorkers, adults, vaccinated with at least one dose, but he's just flexing his power muscles just cuz, I guess. I mean, this is his attempt to justify it in an interview on MSNBC that he just gave. Take a listen, Hannah.
Well, we're under attack a different way right now from the coronavirus. And we've got Omicron as a new factor. We've got the colder weather, which is going to really create additional challenges with the Delta variant. We've got holiday gatherings. We in New York City have decided to use a preemptive strike to really do something bold to stop the further growth of COVID and the dangers it's causing to all of us.
So he's just using these hypothetical things like Omicron or the winter months as like, there is no current COVID problem in New York City. And he's just using hypothetical fears to like scare people into submission, I guess.
I mean, yeah, that's essentially what he's doing. And he's continuing to push things that have never made New York City safer, have never prevented deaths there. And so I really do think it's a power trip thing. I think it's something he's on his way out. He just wants to do one more thing to like terrorize people before he's out. But the sad thing about this is it has real consequences. Ultimately, if you look at who this impacts, I think only 55% of Black residents in the city are vaccinated. This actually taps into a really problematic, deep, dark history in America, where we have this very bad reputation for carrying out research, pushing medications on the Black community without their consent, using coercion, using manipulation, and there's been some really terrible human rights violations that have occurred. It makes sense why this population is a bit more hesitant around the vaccine for that reason, and also for some other medical reasons that include the fact that oftentimes when new medicines are introduced or new pharmaceuticals or vaccines, they don't always do the amount of testing that they need to on marginalized communities. And we know that chemically people in different demographics can have very different reactions to medications. Our bodies are different. And so when they don't do the research that's needed, those populations then don't have the same security and assuredness that the vaccine is safe for them. You and I both got the vaccine and I think would encourage other people to get it. But I very much understand why the Black community would be hesitant around this. And when you look at what New York City is actually saying, they're saying you're going to put this in your body or we're not going to allow you to work. So obviously this is something that's going to hit marginalized communities the most. I think it's really disgusting. I think it is a human rights violation. And at the end of the day, I joke about my experience in New York City, but to be quite frank, I was very privileged in the fact that I was able to get out and leave whenever I wanted to. I had the money to leave. I had somewhere to go. I had family that had a house where I was perfectly capable of getting to and could stay with them until I figured out my next move. I had a job where I could work wherever I wanted to. That is something the vast majority of people simply do not have, especially in a high cost of living place like New York City. And so they're really putting people between a rock and a hard place. And I think that this is something that people should have a lot of outrage over. And I also think it's something that we have to look back and recognize we paved the pathway for with things like the war on drugs. Because when you say the government can take away people's liberties, can even put them in jail for what they voluntarily choose to put in their body, you set the legal precedent, you pave the pathway for the government to then do things like this, where it can basically block you from being able to work and earn a livelihood because of something you choose not to put in your body. And this is why it's so important that we always make sure we stand in the gap early on, the minute we see the government starting to infringe on liberties, even if for people that we don't like or over subjects that we don't agree with. I don't agree with drug use. I think it leads to addiction. Obviously, I think it should be treated like a public health issue. I don't think we should have ever allowed the government to put people in jail over their drug use, though. And so it's so important that we recognize how we end up in situations like this. It didn't just happen because of the pandemic. It comes from a long line of both Democrats and Republicans opening that door over a myriad of other issues. And so people need to recognize that not only did their previous actions lead to this, but if they don't stand up against this now, God only knows what flows from it, 10 years down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, but I also find it just ironic that New York City is supposedly this progressive, woke place, but this is the same city that brought us stop and frisk, where the police literally just stopped mostly black young men without a warrant, without probable cause, and just searched them randomly, looking for things to possibly trip them up over or get them in trouble. And it's like we're supposed to believe this so-called bastion of liberal governance for this political philosophy of big government that claims to champion the marginalized is actually going to help those communities. I certainly don't see that. And I don't see that in terms of this mandate. It honestly just, I don't know if it's a power trip, but I don't see any justification for mandates at a point where there's a safe and effective vaccine that prevents serious illness and death at a very high rate. You and I both chose to take it. I actually just signed up to get a booster this week. We believe it should be a choice, but we definitely encourage that. But once everybody has that option, and they do, I mean, if adults, that 10% of New York City adults who have not received the vaccine, if they're choosing that risk, I mean, that's personal responsibility. That's their choice. And if they die as a result, that is sad, but I don't think anyone has business restricting the freedom of others to prevent that. I mean, that's their choice and their life to make. And what are they supposed to do? Like not work or just comply? Because at this point, I would imagine that most of that 10%, they're not just people who haven't had the chance yet. Like the vaccine is free at the point of service. Taxpayers are paying for it. And you've had months and months now to get it if you want it. That 10% has to be stubborn holdouts who, for one reason or another, some valid, like you said, some kooky and kind of conspiratorial and maybe not with much basis. But for one reason or another, these are people that really don't want it. And I don't see how depriving them of the ability to work and potentially, getting them evicted or making them homeless or getting them on welfare, like how that helps anything is just beyond me.
Right. And you also have to include in people in that population that have medical exemptions, that have real health reasons why they cannot get the vaccine. That's an ongoing thing that some people are facing. But I think this actually is a perfect example of my problem with the left's ideology, right? Like I can vibe with them up to a certain point. They're like, this is a problem and this is a problem. And government does this wrong and it hurts people in this way. And I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And then they're like, so give it more power. And I'm like, wait, like, you lost me. You took a real U-turn there. Like that doesn't make any sense. And this is why their ideology fails. They're not wrong about problems they observe. They're not wrong that government has hurt some populations more than others. But then they turn around and they want to keep giving it more authority and more power to keep hurting people. And who do you think it hurts the most? It hurts people on the margins. And so it's just secular kind of logic that never works out. And I think that people need to start wising up to it, right? I don't think that it comes from bad intentions, but it doesn't actually wash. It doesn't hold up. And really, if you look at what they're pushing right now, it is the anti-vaccine narrative. Like it's the most anti-vaccine narrative because what you're saying is that you don't think people who've made the choice to get vaccinated, which is most people, are protected in that choice, right? Which it doesn't actually wash. The science doesn't say that. It says you're protected if you get the vaccine, that you will have a less likely chance of dying from this vaccine, that you'll probably have a more mild case. And that's as much as we can hope. And if people choose to do something foolish and not get the vaccine, I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's prudent. I know people who have died from COVID, but that is their choice. Just like it is my choice if I decide to go drive 120 miles per hour down the interstate, just like it's my choice if I choose to stuff my face with donuts every day and give myself diabetes. Like, is it prudent? Is it wise? No. And we should try to educate people and hopefully provide them with enough transparency and accountability that they feel safe moving forward with these treatments. But if they choose to do it, that's their choice.
Donuts are pretty good though.
Donuts are, I can't eat them though because I have a gluten allergy. So I'm like, it's like an extra safeguard.
So Hannah, though, I have to say we have not even gotten to the craziest part of New York City's new regime. And that is that they don't just have vaccine mandates. They also have vaccine passports. You're excluded from public life in terms of restaurants, public venues like entertainment. If you can't show proof of vaccination, they've now expanded that so it includes children. Here is what Mayor Bill de Blasio had to say in justifying this expansion of their vaccine passport system.
Our youngest kids We got to reach them now. Right now in the city, it's about 20% have gotten vaccinated in that 5 to 11 range. It's new. The vaccine's relatively new. But what we're trying to say to parents is it's urgent. Before Omicron grows, before Delta continues to stress us even worse in the winter months, get your kid vaccinated. And here's an incentive to do it. A lot of parents, of course, want to take their kids out to wonderful things that'll be happening in the holiday season. Here's a reminder, get your child vaccinated. Just one dose will immediately qualify any child to be able to participate in those activities.
So I just have to be honest. I found this portion of his remarks and of the policy the most horrifying because just to begin with, I mean, healthy kids are at a risk of death from COVID-19 that is statistically indistinguishable from zero. It's like 0.000001%. So kids do not really need this vaccine. I don't think it would hurt them or anything, but it's not as if there's some pressing safety of kids at stake here. And also, that should be a parent's choice, first of all. But the twisted part of this is the way that he's like saying, if you want your kid to be able to go out this holiday season, basically, unless you want us to lock out your kid from Christmas in the world, then you better do this thing we want you to do that many of you have decided not to. It just seems really unnecessary, unwarranted, and really authoritarian. Like, I guess this mayor just gets off on it, the power trip. But there's no justification for this because the vaccine protects you. So it does not matter if kids around you are unvaccinated. If you've received the vaccine, you are protected. And so there's no basis here, right? New York City has extremely low rates of COVID and deaths right now, minuscule deaths from COVID. They've got widespread vaccination. Kids are not at risk. And he's just using these hypothetical fears to basically take control of the most intimate and personal health decisions of parents over their child. And I just find that deeply disturbing. And the Christmas part is just grinchy and weird.
I mean, it's horrible. I don't mean to laugh, but like, it's just so villainy. Like, get the vaccine as a child or we're going to take away Santa. Like, that's harsh.
Can't go see Santa at the mall. Sorry,
Right.
little Billy.
You know, those little creepy elf on the shelves. It's going to be like checking for your vaccine passport now. Like, it's just getting really... I'm done.
I feel bad for the kids, though. I really do. But there's some hope at the end of the tunnel. And that is that the new New York City mayor, Eric Adams, I don't know a ton about him, but he's a little bit more of an enigma, a little more heterodox than Bill de Blasio. And from what I've read, he's not fully on board with all of this. So I'm hoping that a lot of it proves short-lived.